Hi there and welcome to MiWeek. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Christy McDonald. We are talking money this week. We'll take a look at how the president's new budget proposal could affect the new international trade crossing to Canada. Plus, roads are terrible, potholes are everywhere. Just how much will the state spend to fix them? It's setting up a fight between the House and the Senate. A big deal this week could be the key to Detroit's bankruptcy resolution. We'll explain that for you coming up. And election 2014 tonight, we are focusing on the race for Wayne County Executive. But let's start with President Obama's proposed budget that came out this week. The feds were supposed to pick up the tab on the $250 million service plaza on the U.S. side of the new international trade crossing. But there is no mention in this budget, a move that could delay the bridge project since land acquisition is supposed to start this summer. We will start there tonight with Nolan Finley of the Detroit News, Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. Gentlemen, it's good to see you.
Good to be here.
All right, so we're starting with President Obama's budget that came out this week, and mysteriously, no $250 million.
$4 trillion in that budget. There just must not have been any Democratic votes to be got with that $250 million.
Now, and it was interesting because other infrastructure and bridge projects were mentioned in other states, Stephen.
Yeah, well, I actually talked to some people who are involved in the bridge deal about this last week, and there's concern, right? That we need Congress to allocate this money at some point, but it's also not crucial that it got into this budget because the Customs Plaza is not going to be built for several years, and Congress, Congress does a budget every year. Now, it would have helped us out if we could have gotten it onto that list, onto that priority list. But the other projects that did make it into there are projects that are happening sooner and needed to be done sooner. So the stuff that's going to happen this year is still going to go ahead. You're still going to have land acquisition. There's all kinds of technical study and stuff going on. They're talking about some demolition happening this year. There's nothing that bars that because Congress didn't put it into this year's budget. Again, it would have been better if they had, but it's not. This is not a deal breaker.
But Stephen
It's not
Harper
a deal breaker, but is it a time delayer?
Well, it could be, and we don't. It just depends whether it gets in next year's budget. Stephen Harper put it in his budget,
right?
In the Canadian budget. I mean, it's a priority for the Canadians. I think. Given the delay we've already seen with the Keystone, this is an important infrastructure project and a trade project for the Canadians. I think it would have been a good faith measure for them to put that money in this budget. And, really, it's $250 million. They allocate $250 million to study squirrel tails. And this is a project that will create jobs, which is what the president said he wants his budget to do.
Well, and the bigger question is whether they want to do it at all. I mean, I think that is more of an issue. There's still a dispute about who should pay for this Customs Plaza. I mean, I'm not sure.
Are the Canadians picking up the bill for almost pretty much everything else?
The Canadians are picking up the bill for
90%.
everything else. There are some people who believe, I think in Washington, that maybe the Canadians ought to pick that bill up too. I'm not sure why that makes sense. I think there are some arm wrestling going on between the state and the federal government about who should pick up this tab.
So then really this is not a finished deal.
It's
when
not
you
a
say
done
it
deal,
wasn't wasn't in the budget this year, but it's pretty much going to maybe be in the next couple of years. It wasn't crucial, but this to me sounds like there's still wrangling going on.
I expect that eventually it'll make it in there, right? You're not going to build the bridge without the Customs Plaza. To me, it's pretty clear that that's a federal government responsibility. But because this is such a strange deal, and you have so much of the tab being picked up by a foreign government for infrastructure project on American soil, I think there's still this weird sort
Except
of,
if you look at this budget, Steve, it's larded up with all sorts of things
sure.
the federal government has no business spending money on. This
like
is
the squirrel tail study, which
Exactly.
I would really love to see and read, I guess.
We'll have it on MiWeek. This is a project, an infrastructure project, a trade project. It is certainly something the federal government ought to be doing.
No question.
It's within the federal government's realm of responsibility, a core obligation, if you will. Why not do those things first before you start throwing money everywhere else? This was a very small amount compared to the total amount that bridge is going to cost, $2 billion. Most of it the Canadians are going to pick up. This was a good faith sign. Let's do it. Let's show our commitment and plus our appreciation for them paying for the rest of it.
So what happens in the backroom dealings now, Stephen? Who picks up the phone from Michigan, or what part of the congressional delegation and calls the White House and says, hey, are you going to put something in this deal or what?
I think it is. I think it's more on the congressional delegation than I think it is on state government to lobby the other members to say, look, this has got to get in at some point. And I think there will be more urgency to that negotiation once there's actual construction going on. I mean, once we have, this time next year, we could see footings and things starting to go in. Then you're really talking about you got to have the money to start.
I don't think those footings are going to go in until that money's committed.
I was just going to say, that's part of the chicken and the egg thing. Don't you want to make sure you've got the money for that kind of project before you put your footings in? Or is everyone just kind of waiting to see what happens? And
I mean, they're doing some preliminary work. The Canadians are buying up land, but they're not going to push ahead with a really expensive portion of this unless they see. I mean, basically, the Canadians bought our meal here, and all they're asking for us to do is leave the tip, and we're too cheap to do that. I would expect sometime, around September, October, the administration will give Gary Peters a check to come and wave around and saying he got this money for the new bridge,
All right, talk to me a little bit,
That'd
Stephen.
be good for his reelection.
That would be very interesting in an
and
election year.
That's the point. That's all this budget is about.
That's a good idea.
It's all this budget
Democrats
is
just wrote that down.
Just help Gary out
great
quite
idea.
a bit.
I think
All right,
they
so-
had that in mind.
But what about some of the land acquisition that's supposed to happen this summer? Is that, I hesitate to say done deal because nothing is a done deal in this situation, but is that moving along the way it should be?
It is. My understanding is that everything that's planned to happen this year on the bridge is going to happen one way or another, and that this money didn't really have a triggering effect on any of it. We're not at that point yet, but it's clear that you can't wait forever to decide to pay for the construction of the customs plaza. You can't have a bridge without a customs plaza, and the customs plaza can't get built without the money. So it is something that's got to get done. But my understanding is that this is not at the panic stage yet. At least not in Lansing.
Not
And
yet.
it's
Last
not
word, Nolan.
It's not a state responsibility, as some people are suggesting.
Yeah.
This is a federal customs plaza. The federal government should build it. This is not something Michigan taxpayers should get stuck with.